Favourite thing about covering the Tour is, I think, just travelling all over France, all the different places you go, all the different things you see. We try to get out there, watch the roads come past when we can. Of course, if you stand at the roadside and watch the roads come past, you sort of spend half an hour getting in place and sorting yourself out and parking your car. We end up going back and watching the highlights to find out what's actually happened.
There's always traffic jams at the Tour de France, and one of the stories I always recall is when myself and Lionel Burney were stuck in a traffic jam on the Route de Soleil down there in the heat of southern France, and we were stuck in a traffic jam for about half an hour next to a truck of pigs going to the abattoir, and they absolutely stank, and we closed all the windows but we couldn't get the smell out of our nostrils for about 2 days, and every time we pulled forward and stopped, they'd pull up and next to us, and we just couldn't get away from this truckload of pigs who had a pretty awful fate awaiting them.
Best Tour memory, here's one I just thought of, was Eric van der Aarden riding along in the neutralised zone, stealing hats from spectators, all kinds of different bizarre hats. He was putting them on, riding for 100 yards, stealing another one, swapping them, throwing them down. He did that for 9 or 10 times. It was the bunch were just in pieces with it. It was hilarious.
It sticks in the mind when Bradley Wiggins started winning the Tour really in 2012, when he went into the lead in Plateau de Bay, and then he just trounced the time trial. And I remember actually just standing across the finish line when he came in after doing that time trial, and he just came across the line and he got off his bike and he just sort of strutted towards the podium, just looking very, very confident, very cocky almost. And you just suddenly knew then, you know, Wiggins was really in this to win it. It suddenly seemed quite surreal and almost a bit of a journalistic challenge for us. We've always made a big fuss of who's in the yellow jersey, and now suddenly it was kind of one of our own, somebody we know very well at the magazine, suddenly taking control of the race.
I don't think I'll ever forget being in Paris at the end of the 2012 Tour de France, and what a magical day that was for British cycling. Bradley Wiggins clinching the Tour victory, Mark Cavendish winning the final stage. I mean, the atmosphere on the Champs-Élysées was electric. Everywhere you went, you just heard British accents, really. It seemed like we were watching the final stage of the Tour of Britain and Westminster as opposed to being in Paris. And the roar that went up when we finally heard that Mark Cavendish had won that stage was deafening.
One of my Tour memories is only actually from a couple of years ago, the 2013 Tour when it went up Alpe d'Huez, and I drove one of the press cars up Alpe d'Huez, and the queue of cars getting up Alpe d'Huez through the crowds, it's chaos up there. There are thousands of people trying to drive cars through them. It's very, very stressful, and you've got to drive right on the bumper of the car in front or somebody gets into the gap. And I left a little bit of a gap near the front, and a Frenchman ran across the road pulling something behind him, and I just drove on after he'd gone across the road in front of me. And then suddenly there was screaming and chaos and panic, and what had happened was he was unrolling the 2 kilometre to go banner ready to put it up, and I'd driven over the banner and then had the car parked over the banner, and they made me reverse, and there was chaos, and half the mountain had to reverse so I could get back. And the final denouement of the thing, when I was watching the race on television in the press room that afternoon, I could see across the 2 kilometre to go barrier there were 2 sets of tyre tracks from my car, so I felt I left a properly lasting impression on Alpe d'Huez.
One of the best days I had on the Tour was when I was on the back of a motorbike. So every day there are 3 press motorbikes on the course, and they take a journalist and they go right up close with the riders. And it was a really exciting day, and we zoomed from the peloton up to the break, and then sat around and waited for the peloton, and we went into the finish just in front of the peloton to the last 10k when we had to race ahead, and that was an amazing day's racing. And to get to see it so close was a totally new experience for me.
Press motorbike, yeah. I had a day on that once, I think in 2013, and I thought I'd picked a sort of corker of a day. It was the day when the race went across the Camargue, I think from Aix to Montpellier, perhaps. And I thought, brilliant, it's going to be crosswinds, it's going to blow to bits, I'm going to see all the echelons, and absolutely nothing happened the whole stage. It was possibly the dullest Tour stage that I've covered.
Back in 2013, the opening stage of the race was in Corsica, and I was on a press motorbike for the whole stage. With about 30k to go, we zoomed ahead to get to the finish, and I got off the bike and I thought something's not quite right here.
It almost ended in disaster on the very first stage, because that was the day the bus got stuck underneath the finishing gantry.
And what followed in 30 kilometres of bike riding, Tour de France bike riding to go, was the most desperate attempts to move this bus off the finish line. They moved the gantry, they deflated the tyres, and all the time this bus driver had his head in his hands in pure embarrassment. I can't imagine what he was thinking.
With about 1 kilometre to go,
They said that they were shortening the race by at least a kilometre, and we're going to finish it effectively behind where we were. So we stopped the motorbike with a huge crowd thinking we've just missed the finish because it's behind us. And I did something that you should never ever do on the race, which is turn the motorbike around. If we'd been seen by a Tour de France team car, we would have been thrown out of the race on that very first day, and that would have been the end of my Tour de France. We turned back towards what would have been the new finish, when they then said, no, no, the finish is back where the bus was.
They finally got it out of the way with about 5 kilometres to go, and the race had absolutely no idea just how close they came to piling into the back of it at 40 miles an hour.
Probably because it's fresh in the memory, be last year's Grand Depart in Yorkshire. Just the atmosphere and the excitement around Yorkshire and Leeds that weekend was something I haven't experienced since the Olympics in London. It was something you could feel in the air. It was absolutely amazing. The riders knew it, everyone knew it, and everyone just had an amazing weekend.
I think the final stage of the Grand Depart in England last year was spectacular, from Cambridge to London. I don't think it'll ever be remembered as fondly as the 2 stages in Yorkshire, but the atmosphere and the amount of people that turned up on the roadside for that leg from Cambridge to London was spectacular.
Whenever I think back to that amazing weekend, all I see in my head is just the crowds, incredible crowds. You could barely see the outlying kind of scenery. Even on that 3rd stage going through Essex, there was one point where we turned a corner and dipped down into this idyllic Essex village, and it was just like riding onto the stage at Glastonbury. It was unbelievable. In the centre of it, just seeing a little snaking ribbon of colour, which was the peloton.
I got to go on a press motorbike for it, and it was great just being on the roads that I know so well and are so familiar, but actually seeing them traffic free, full of spectators either side, and just the whole party atmosphere. Actually felt like a carnival, and seeing these people that come out to watch the race, actually really drove home to me the power that cycling have, and the power of sport. Actually, it transcends any kind of nationality or any kind of background or social class, and it really provided an inspirational day.